Hi, my name's Nick, and this is my review and my defense of The Last Jedi, since most of the opinions I hear about it are vastly negative. Starting from the beginning, the biggest complaint I hear about the first thing in the movie is that when the Dreadnought shows up, it should have blown up the cruiser instead of the base. And they had their orders directly from Snoke, and the orders were destroy the base, destroy the cruiser, and kill any remaining. So Hux followed these orders exactly to the letter. First, he destroyed the base because you don't know how many rebels are in the base, still evacuating. Then they planned to fire on the cruiser next. Also, if they did that, we wouldn't have a movie. So some plot contrivance is necessary. I don't consider this to be bad writing. I think that's an unfair judgment a lot of people level at this movie, and bad is such a pejorative term. Hux talking to Poe, I found it funny. It's okay if you don't think it's funny, but it is an effective delaying tactic. He only had to stall him for about 30 seconds or so to upload whatever the shield lowering thing was, and it got that done. Why were there no Y-Wings? Why did they have to use those big, slow, stupid bombers that, when they explode and they run into each other? Well, if you remember from the last movie, most of the Rebel fleet has been destroyed. That's why there's no Y-Wings. They probably haven't had any kind of resupply, and you'll see throughout this movie the Resistance is forced to rely on substandard technology, and it enhances the idea of our heroes fighting back with almost nothing against an implacable foe armed to the teeth. That's the nature of heroism in Star Wars. It's always been that way, ever since a squad of single X-Wing fighters took out the Death Star. That's the nature of this conflict. So we go to Octo and Luke refusing to train Rey, throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder. Again, I found this really funny. It's okay if you didn't, but it's totally understandable when you learn where Luke is coming from and how he feels about his past as a Jedi, and especially as the legend Luke Skywalker. It makes perfect sense with his character. I loved his character in this movie, because if you wanted the Ascended Master Jedi Luke Skywalker, that's in the EU. That's all over the expanded universe. We've seen that. Let's have something new. Now, I can't really defend not seeing his reaction to finding out Han is dead, except to say that Hamill's face says it all. You don't need any more lines from him. As soon as he asks the question, "Where's Han?" when he sees they came in the Falcon and Han's not with him, he already knows, and his face tells you everything. It tells you his reaction right there on the screen. You don't need any more lines from him expressing how sad he is. Next, we get a scene with Snoke and Kylo Ren, and I just want to point out the difference in relationship between the Emperor and Vader. The Emperor brought Vader up with positive reinforcement his entire life, telling him how great he was, reinforcing his ego. And Snoke has taken a different tactic with Kylo, instead propelling him with negative reinforcement, because Kylo's a very different person than Anakin was. He was not raised as a Jedi from the same age, I don't think, as Anakin was. And they just have different temperaments. And Snoke is a very different person from Palpatine. And this is probably why he ends up getting betrayed, why there's no affection that Kylo has for Snoke. He's probably been waiting to betray him for a while. When he feels a pull to the light, that's kind of like what the pull represents. How it manifests is, I want to kill this freaking guy. Now, then we go back to Octo and Luke drinking the alien boob milk. Besides this being a great monster, this is classic Star Wars weirdness, okay? It's not disrespectful to the character. It's, I love the look he gives Rey as he drinks it. Like, yeah, this is what you signed up for. This is the guy that you crossed the galaxy to find. How do you like me now? And it's funny. Hamill may not have been too happy when he read the script, but I think he warmed to the character as shooting went on. And now with Rise of Skywalker in place, this movie plays so much better. There will be some minor spoilers for Rise of Skywalker in here, only when I cannot avoid it, so I do suggest you have watched that film before you watch this review. I will provide warnings. And then we see Luke jump across this platform with his giant spear thing, showing that he's still a badass without the Force. This does not lessen his character. In fact, it strengthens it. Up till now, Luke has mostly been a badass because of the Force. And now we see that he has become a badass without the Force. So this only deepens and strengthens his character. I hear that people complain all the time that Rey doesn't have an arc in these movies. Yes, she does. She goes from a scavenger in the desert to a fully fledged Jedi, from being consumed by her fear and her loneliness to being confident in who she is and what she can do. This is called a character arc. You're pretending not to see it because you want to hate her, and I can't understand why. I really can't. I love Rey's character. Her emotions are the core of this entire trilogy. Now, we get Poe and Leia. Leia chews Poe out because he disobeyed orders, and he needs to learn his lesson, and this is true. You know, his actions led to some good rebel pilots dying. Even though they did take out a dreadnought, you can't disobey orders if you're going to be the leader that Leia wants you to be. She appreciates what he does, she just wants him to do more. Because right after saying to him, you can't solve everything by jumping in the X-Wing and blowing something up, 5 seconds after that they get attacked, and he asks permission to do that, and she says yes, go jump in the X-Wing and blow something up. So she definitely appreciates what he's good at. She just wants him to do more. She wants him to move into a command position. Kylo's redemption arc is well underway when we see that he is unable, or at least unwilling, to shoot the missiles and blow up Leia. After having just killed his father, Snoke points out this has torn him to the core. And he is more conflicted than ever, rather than being strengthened to the dark side. Which is another way in which he's very different from Anakin. You know, it shows that there's different ways to become a Darksider. Everyone doesn't turn the same way, everyone doesn't stay the same way. However, his lieutenants do shoot, and this is my very most hated complaint about this movie, is the Leia in space scene, where she uses the Force to pull herself back. Minor spoiler for Rise, Leia had Force training from Luke. And we see that in Rise of Skywalker, so it's totally explained why she has Force power. I used to defend it as just instinctual use of the Force, but I don't even need to now, because it's been explained and addressed. But what I was thinking, this was just a few months after Carrie Fisher had died in real life when this movie came out. And when I saw that scene, all I could think was that Carrie Fisher may be gone, but Princess Leia will never die. That on screen she is immortal, and in the hearts of Star Wars fans, real Star Wars fans, she is immortal. How you can complain about this scene, I will never understand. Have you no heart? Anyway, I hear complaints about how when she came back into the ship, the airlock should have blown her away, and you'll see that there's 2 sets of doors on the bridge where she comes through. So the back set of doors close around her. Also, there's a burst of air when the door to the ship opens. This could be to counteract the vacuum effect. Whatever explanation you want to go with. Or just, hey, it's Star Wars. But I don't like to fall back on that. I like to address complaints logically because I believe the film does address complaints logically. They thought of this. Yet people always think they're smarter than the movie and they've caught something out. No, you didn't. We get a great scene with Luke and R2-D2, where R2 plays him the message that started the whole thing, with Leia, you know, asking Obi-Wan for help, and Luke says that's a cheap shot, but it's great to see these 2 old friends get back together. I wish there was more R2 in these movies too, but he is all over the other 6 movies. We don't need him here. You know, he's done his job. Let R2 rest. We have other droids. Now, why does Holdo withhold her plan from Poe? I think Holdo is fine as a character. I like her quite a bit. I love the actress, and she reminds me a lot of Leia. It makes sense that this is someone that she would know and respect and have in the chain of command after Leia is incapacitated. But she withholds her plan from Poe, one, because we need the movie to happen. It's needed for the plot. But within the universe, you can explain it as there could be spies among the rebels, and even though she may trust Poe, she may not trust everyone he might tell, which would be everyone. So it's best to keep your plan secret, just in case, because it is such a desperate situation. It does make logical sense in the film. It is not bad writing. What you're doing when you call it bad writing is bad criticism. Now, Rose. I'm not the biggest fan of Rose. I don't think she deserves nearly all the hate that she gets, but she's not really a special or fun character. She doesn't do or say anything really fun. She is just kind of there. And so, yeah, but in the meta context, Rose represents the new fans just coming into Star Wars, who don't really have that good a grasp on the universe yet. And My biggest problem with her is that she flip-flops. Immediately when she meets Finn and he's heading to the escape pod, she's incredibly impressed that he's this big resistance hero, and then 5 seconds after that, she stuns him and is going to throw him in the brig for treason. She can't even imagine he might have a good reason for wanting to leave the ship. And really, Finn could have just said, I'm on a secret mission, and that would have been enough to convince her. But again, the plot needs this to happen. This, I'll admit, is a little bit contrived. But since I like the movie, I'm willing to forgive it. Now, we hear about how the ship is running out of fuel, and people will complain that fuel never existed, was never a concern in any of the other movies. Fuel has always existed in Star Wars. What do you think Tabana gas is? What do you think they're doing on Bespin? They're mining Tabana gas to turn into fuel. It's always been there, it's just never mattered until now. This movie tries to ground Star Wars a little bit more in realism, which I don't really agree with as an aesthetic. I feel it's a fantasy and it doesn't need the realism, but I understand what he was going for. So it's fine, because it is, again, important to the plot. The B-plot plan, the plan to shut down the tracking system that tracks them through hyperdrive, it's a good plan. If it worked, it would be great. Even though the plan failed, you can't fault him for trying, because it is a good plan that Poe comes up with. Or Poe and Finn together. We get a scene where they see Maz Kanata jumping and running around and shooting people and using a jetpack, showing that Maz Kanata is not just an old cantina owner, she's a badass, and I like her character a lot. So I was happy to get that scene and see that she's 1,000 years old, by the way, and she's still running around doing this stuff. It makes Yoda not the only one who lived almost a millennium. It deepens the Star Wars universe, showing us that races can be extremely long-lived. Chewie is 250, I think, and he's still quite in the prime of life. And it shows just how transient human life is in this universe, where we live 100 years, most at the max. Next, we get our first instance of the Rey and Kylo Ren telepathy scene. Most people seem to like the Rey and Kylo plot, so I won't talk too much about that. That doesn't need to be addressed as much. I love it. It's the core of this movie, the A story with Rey and Kylo. Everyone's pretty much okay with that, because everybody likes Kylo Ren. Even the ones who complain about the movie are like, okay, yeah, I like Kylo. We see Rey training on the planet with Luke, and I love the space nuns, little things with wimples who run around and are upset at all of Rey's behavior. I think it's a really funny dynamic. I love the Porgs. That's all I'll say. You can see one right up there. I love Porgs. They're adorable, and they don't detract from the movie a bit. And they have such a small amount of screen time, it doesn't make sense to complain about them. They're a bit toyetic, but what in Star Wars isn't at this point? I love grumpy old man Luke. He's also so funny. And this is another side to his character. It's been 30 years since we last saw him in Return of the Jedi. A lot has happened to him, and he's just a whole new man at this point. We'll find out, why he is this way, why he's disillusioned and downtrodden, because he utterly blames himself for the fall of the Jedi again, for losing Ben Solo to the dark side. I think he just couldn't face life with Leia and Han. If he had been still talking to them, he would feel like just apologizing all the time. Remember what a deep heart Luke had. He always wanted to help his friends, and when he felt like he'd failed his friends so deeply, exiling himself is the only punishment he felt was appropriate. That's why he insists on not coming back, and why, he almost doesn't. Even at the end, he still doesn't come back in proper form. He just, uses the Force to try and save the day from a distance. Now, the slow speed chase that the movie's built around represents this movie, whereas The Force Awakens copied A New Hope, or at least remade or repurposed a lot of the same beats. This movie tries to do both for Empire and Jedi. It repurposes and puts in a lot of things that echo Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back in order to give us a blank slate for Episode 9. At the end of this movie, I had no idea what was coming in Episode 9, and a lot of people criticize this, saying, well, they had to do what they did in 9 to make up for this. That was the entire point. That was the plan, Rian Johnson didn't sneak this by and screw over Disney. This is what they wanted. They wanted to get both movies out of the way, in one movie so that 9 could be its own thing. It's a completely different animal. Because it's unlike the ending of any trilogy before, is it's ending the entire saga. Now, the Canto Bight scene, a lot of people criticize because it looks like the prequels, and it does. It's supposed to look like the prequels. It provides a connective tissue to the prequels, which ties the entire saga together. And we've never seen a planet like it, where it's a casino planet where the rich hang out, and there's a little bit of a political message here. Honestly, if that annoys you so much you hate the movie, there's nothing I can say to help you. You need to divorce the art from reality and realize it's a different universe, and you're just seeing another corner of it. The same thing that applies to the fuel applies to the economy, the weapons selling in Star Wars. This has always been there, it's just never mattered before where the ships and the weapons all came from. You know, the Empire isn't making blasters and TIE fighters, they're buying them from somewhere. The Rebels aren't building their own X-Wings, they're buying them from somewhere. But I don't think that it's like the American war economy where, you know, the war needs to keep going in order to sell the weapons. The war would be going no matter what. The weapon sellers are just profiteering off of it, you know? It's not exactly analogous to our system. So yeah, Luke blames the Jedi for their failure. He's projecting his own failure onto the Jedi as a whole, saying, and this shows you the depth of how Luke feels about his failure, is that it can only be compared to the galactic scale of failure of the Jedi as a whole. That they, in their prime of their power, allowed Palpatine to rise and kill them all and create Darth Vader. That he, in the height of his power, allowed Ben Solo to rise and tear down all he had built. But if you know the deeper history of Star Wars, this has gone back hundreds of thousands of years. The Jedi and Sith have been warring since the dawn of time, and it's always been this way. There have been several Sith empires that have risen and fallen, and several periods where the Jedi held sway. We're only seeing one tiny segment of it in all of the Star Wars movies. There's a great video on YouTube that shows you just a galactic map, and when the Sith took over, what sectors, when the Jedi took over. I suggest you watch it to get an idea of what the larger conflict is like. Rey's scene in the cave. She touches the dark side cave wall and sees only herself in a giant line going back and forth, and she has to see her parents, and it just shows her herself. This is a dark side vision, the same as Luke got a dark side vision, warning him that if he struck down Vader in anger, he would become him. Rey is seeing her path to the dark side, and it's her loneliness. Yoda says that anger, fear, hatred, these are paths to the dark side, but also depression. And Rey's depression comes from her loneliness. This is illustrating her path to the dark side. It's telling her to look beyond herself and find connections with other people, or else this is what's going to happen to her. That she'll always be alone. You know, because she's, I think, still holding out hope to find her family at this point. And as we know from Rise, spoiler, they've been dead for a long time. So, then Rey confronts, from another telepathy scene, Rey finds out that Kylo blames Luke for attacking him in his sleep and, you know, turning him to the dark side that way. And she confronts Luke about it, saying, did you create Kylo? And they have a fight, where Luke pulls an antenna off a building, and they fight for a bit. Rey's got her quarterstaff, and Luke wins this fight. People complain that Rey beat Luke in this fight. No, she didn't. What happens is that Luke fends off Rey's attack. She's got a double-ended weapon. He's got one single antenna, not even intended to be a weapon, and he still beats her. He takes her staff away from her, and then she gets her lightsaber with the Force and holds it at his neck. That's not her winning the fight. That's Luke winning the fight and her cheating afterward. So there's no disrespect to the character in this. You're misreading into it if you think there was. A lightsaber is always going to beat an antenna. That was her throwing the board over, basically. So no, Rey is not a better fighter than Luke. You know. And that's the other thing. People keep complaining that Rey didn't have any training. Yes, she does. This is training. This entire sequence on this entire planet is training. And she gets even more training in the next movie because you still didn't shut up about it. Honestly, the apologia in the next movie, so much of this is addressed at the angry Star Wars fan base, and I don't even think it's done any good listening to their reaction. They're just angrier than ever. Which makes me think nothing the movie ever did would have made it up to you. You're just, there's a group of people determined to hate the current Star Wars movies coming out. The exact same thing happened with the prequels. People hated them no matter what, and that's why George Lucas sold the franchise. There's no way he was going to walk into that again. So Luke wins the fight with Rey. He tells her the truth, his full perspective on why he pulled his lightsaber out and ignited it, because he felt that Snoke had already turned Ben Solo. He turned him to the dark side, and he had a brief flash of instinct and thought maybe he could end it. I don't think it was a conscious decision even to ignite his lightsaber. I don't think he ever, in any universe, would have actually done it. He just thought about it for a second, and Ben woke up at the worst possible moment. It's a tragic mistake, and he knows it was a mistake. You know, this is the child of his sister and his best friend. There's no way he was actually going to kill him. But he knows what Vader did. He was trying to prevent all that from happening, and he ended up causing it. You know, kind of like Anakin's self-fulfilling prophecy, where he foresaw Padme's death, did everything he could to stop it, and ended up causing it. So we have another echo to another trilogy, and the trilogies are connected by these echoes. So even if I can't convince you it's a good movie, it is consistent with Star Wars. It has always been like this. If you don't like this movie and this trilogy, you don't like Star Wars. Because nothing has changed. Nothing is different. There's a bunch of new things we've never seen before, but it's entirely consistent in tone and quality with the other movies. I love the Puppet Yoda. It's great seeing Puppet Yoda again. You know, just a great scene with Yoda. By the way, you are supposed to hate General Holdo in this movie. You are supposed to identify with Poe by hating Holdo and her apparent inability to be honest and come up with a plan and tell people about it. That's what the movie wants you to feel. But you're supposed to get off that train at the end once Poe is shown to be wrong because the B plan fails and she actually did have a good plan all along. But people forgot to get off the hate train. So you got on the train, good, but get off when the movie tells you to get off. When Leia gives her approval, Holdo reveals she does like Poe. You know, she says he's a troublemaker. I like him. Leia says I do too. Honestly, I don't want to call misogyny, but there is so much female empowerment in this movie, and the amount of hate it's gotten, that can't be a coincidence. It just can't. Even though the critics will be the first ones to insist that it's not misogyny, that they hate bad writing, which is a straw man. Because this is a very well written movie, a very well acted and performed and put together movie. You know. Anyway, the B plan has to fail because the A plan succeeds. In Empire Strikes Back, the A plan is Luke going to save his friends. That fails. But the B plan of his friends escaping, that succeeds. Right? So Luke fails fighting Vader, but the friends escape and save Luke. So to keep an echo of that, to keep the same structure, the B plan fails because Rey's plan to go and fight Snoke amazingly succeeds. She turns Kylo enough that he kills Snoke. And this is such a great success. If the B plan succeeded too, there would be no end of the movie and the good guys would just win completely. And that would not mirror the ending of Empire, which is what this movie most of all needs to do. The throne room scene is so good. I love the set. I love Snoke being so menacing. I think that Kylo is way more badass than Rey. In the fight, you'll see him engaging more opponents at once. Rey is fighting the same guy for quite a while Kylo's killing 5 or 6 of the guards. So, again, if you think this movie is Kathleen Kennedy shoving female empowerment politics down your throat, watch it again with an honest eye, and you'll see, no, the men are way more badass in this movie than the women are. You know, there's a lot of women in command positions, but when it comes down to it, Luke wins the fight with Rey. Kylo's a better fighter than Rey. You know, you're just pushing your own agenda of hating Rey over everything else and ignoring what's actually on screen in front of you. So, Kylo holds out his hand to Rey, asking her to join him, and they can rule the galaxy together. The offer we've seen in every other trilogy from Vader. And she can't. He's asking her to validate his choices, and she can't do that because she's still good. You know, if she was asking him to come join the rebels, he would say no to that too. They're just not at the same place yet. And so they fight over the lightsaber, and it explodes. Now, the Holdo maneuver. This is again addressed in Rise of Skywalker, that it's a 1 in a million shot, because people complain, well, if you could just light speed jump a starship into something and explode it, why didn't they do that to the Death Star? Because this is not a reliable thing you can do. It's a 1 in a million shot, and she just got really lucky when they really needed it to work. You know. So, after all the bad luck the Resistance has had in this movie, I think they're due one lucky stroke, and it's an amazing on-screen effect. Finn and Phasma finally get to have their fight, and he has gone from being utterly dominated by her to being the dominant one. Again, a man dominating a woman. So where are you getting this female empowerment politics bullshit? You're just ignoring what's on screen in front of you, as yet again a man defeats a woman. You know, even though she has 2 feet on him and a lifetime more of Captain Empire soldier training, you know, he wins the fight. I love BB-8 operating a walker to rescue them. We've never seen that before, a droid operating a walker. BB is one of my favorite droids. That's why I don't miss R2 as much in these movies, because BB deserves his trilogy to shine in. And R2 has been in operation since episode 1, you know? Droids do wear out over time. He's probably not even compatible with most of the current starships. Yeah, the Rebellion are desperate heroes, which is why they've died so much, they've lost so much. This is the Rebellion, the Resistance, at its lowest point in any trilogy, where they're down to just a handful of fighters on one planet, backed up against the wall, with the walkers and the might of the First Order coming down on them. And I know I say Empire when I mean First Order. I don't care. It's still the Empire. They just gave it new names. Luke's scene where he comes out, where he first comes and talks to Leia, is so understated and so good, and all we needed to see, you know? The legacy characters were never going to have a bigger part in these, and this is, I think, the respect that is due them, you know? Giving them these important scenes, giving them, you know, what we needed to see. Not more than we needed, just what we needed. And he gives Leia the dice from Han. He says, I'm sorry, which, you know, I'm sorry for everything, for walking away, for staying away, for failing in the first place. And she doesn't hold it against him. He has come to stall the enemy long enough for the good guys to escape, which they do. I love every moment of Luke walking out. You know, it's so apocalyptic. He's walking out this hole where the cannon had blown a hole in the base. Oh yeah, the Resistance fighting back with those rust bucket speeders against the First Order. That is such a symbol for the entire conflict, where they're fighting back with far less than they should have. Everyone loves an underdog, and they're the ultimate underdogs in cinema. They always have been. This is all perfectly consistent with Star Wars. I can't really defend Rose stopping Finn from flying into the cannon, except that it probably wouldn't have done anything. This little rust bucket thing hitting the cannon probably wouldn't have destroyed it. And, you know, it's admirable, I guess, you know. But her line about, what is it? We won't win by killing what we hate, but saving what we love. That's a stupid line. That's why I don't really like Rose. She doesn't have any good lines. She doesn't do anything really good. She just isn't good enough for Star Wars. I don't think she deserves a hate, but she's far from my favorite character. You know, so this isn't a perfect movie. If there is a flaw, it is the character of Rose Tico. But Luke just shows us everything we wanted from the character. He comes back to the fight, he distracts all the gunfire from all the blasters hitting him, and he comes out and does that little shoulder shrug. And then he has the pretend sword fight with Kylo, just playing him like a fiddle. And he says, you know, he has such a great speech. I don't think any criticism you had of Luke's character, they are fixed by this final scene. I don't need to recite what he said. You know, just watch it again, because I can't possibly do it justice. I'm no Mark Hamill. But Leia passes command to Poe, where he tries to lead everyone out of the cave, and they look to her, and she says, what are you looking at me for? Follow him. You know, which means Poe has learned his lesson. He's been admonished, and he is back in the favor of Leia, who is the general leader of the Resistance. And my final thing, I was upset with this movie most of all because Luke died, and I felt that he should have stuck around to the final movie. But after seeing Rise of Skywalker, I understand. He has to die here because there's no room in that movie to do Luke's death a proper justice. There just isn't. This is where it belongs in the story sequence, because Han dies in the first one and it's a huge moment. Luke dies in this one and it's a huge moment. It's the climax of the film, the emotional, go out on a high note, and it's so much more effective after you've seen Rise of Skywalker. And again, spoiler for that movie, Leia dies in that one. I don't think it's too big a spoiler. We all kind of figured it was going to happen, and it's a big moment there. So one of the major three characters dies in each of the films. This was Luke's film. This is where he should have died. And he dies doing something we've never seen anyone do with the Force before. And just displaying a massive amount of power with it. Snoke even says earlier, Kylo says when they're connecting their minds, Rey and Kylo minds are connected. He's like, "You're not doing this. The strain would kill you. To project the Force that far across the galaxy, the strain would kill you." And in fact, it does kill Luke. So this was set up earlier in the film too. But I hope I've convinced you at least why I love this movie and why you should give it another shot and see it in a different light now that 9 is in place. Because we now know why Rey is so powerful too, and I don't want to spoil that just in case anyone hasn't seen it yet. But I hope you'll come back for the final review, Episode 9, which will be even more defensive, because I love that movie even more than this one. The Disney trilogy is... people hate these movies when they come out, but in the full breadth of time, they get a much more favorable opinion. The same has happened to the prequels, and the same will happen to this trilogy. These reviews are more for posterity, just sort of telling the future, see, somebody back then got it. Somebody appreciated these movies for what they were. And to those people, high from the past, I wonder if they're still making numbered Star Wars movies. I guess we'll see. But, as always, I thank you for watching, and I thank you for your time.